everyone. Welcome to the Asian Fantasy Fiction Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Bai. I am a translator and a writer who specializes in Chinese fantasy genres. Right now, one of the projects I'm working on is the translation of Dolo Dalu, or at least a mobile game based on Dolo Dalu or Soul Land, which is one of the probably one of the biggest Chinese fantasy media genres with games and novels and animations and stuff. So I'm kind of excited to be working on that. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can check out my website, which is jeremybai.com, to find all the links. But enough about me. Let's get to our guest today, who is JC Kang. And before we get into it, I have to point out that we actually already recorded an entire episode of this podcast. And I, due to my just not paying attention and not being careful, actually didn't record the session. Well, it got recorded, but the recording got lost. I'm not going to get into all the details. So the point is,
we get to talk again.
We get to talk again. So thank you for making time in your schedule to re-record this session. I really appreciate that a lot.
Hopefully we'll end up better than the last time too. Maybe I'll come up with some smart answers as opposed to babbling on like an idiot.
All right. And maybe I'll come up with some better questions, because I feel like my line of questioning wasn't that good. In any case, so before we start talking, I do want to point out that JC Kang is actually more known as like a traditional fantasy indie author, as opposed to pumping out tons of specifically Asian themed genres like Xianxia and Wuxia or that kind of stuff. Although he does have some of that stuff, which we will get into. But again, he's primarily like a classic Western fantasy author, and probably most known for Legends of Tivara. Is that an accurate statement?
That would be accurate. The one that I'm probably most well known for is the Dragon Song Saga, which is one of the Legends of Tivara. And it is an Asian theme fantasy. So most of the main characters are all Asian. It's based on like 战国时代, that era of Chinese history. Period. Yeah, and so it sort of has a lot of influences there. I was probably influenced a lot by wuxia as well. So even though it is, I would say, a Western style fantasy, it does incorporate Asian themes and cultures.
Cool. If you were going to kind of summarize the general idea of the story or the characters for people who are not familiar with it, how would you go about doing that?
Wow. Okay, so Dragon Song Saga follows an awkward, naive princess who has the natural talent, the natural voice to invoke magic through music, which they call a dragon song. However, this magic is lost, and so she has to rediscover it. And that's the core part of the first series. I have also done a prequel series, Scions of the Black Lotus, which actually follows most of my readers' favorite character, who isn't the main character of Dragon Songs, but the secondary character. They liked her more than the first one. So I created a prequel series for her, which is more about like it's kind of a mix of, I would say, Memoirs of a Geisha, but with ninjas. So
cool. That's funny you mentioned the supporting character being more liked than the main character, because I've had that same, I don't know if you would call it a problem, but I've had that same thing as well. How was the reaction to the secondary story with that secondary character? Were the fans appeased by the focus on that character?
I wouldn't say appeased. I would say that most of them are quite delighted by it. It is a little grittier than my usual. I mean, Dragon Songs is more kind of a coming of age heroic fantasy, and Scions of the Black Lotus is more of a gritty, darker fantasy. But at the same time, I haven't gotten too many complaints from existing readers. Now, from new readers, I get some heck here and there, but.
So in my first self-published book, which I released a few years ago, I had two main characters. One was a male character and one was a female character. And the task of writing a female character was something I don't want to say I struggled with, but there were certain challenges that came with it. Did you find it challenging to have a main character who was a female lead, or did it just kind of come naturally to you?
I think it probably came naturally to me. I'm married. I have two daughters. I'm pretty much surrounded by women. A lot of my friends growing up were women. It seemed like I had more women friends than men friends. So I think it came naturally. I mean, I think you would have to ask readers if they feel like I captured a female point of view. I would say in my defense that several reviewers have, before knowing who I was, they referred to me as a she. So I guess they assumed with JC they didn't know if male or female. So hopefully I hit the right notes.
Okay. For anyone out there who's listening that is a fan of the series, I will ask a question on their behalf, and it maybe it's kind of a cliche question for authors, but what was your favorite part of the series for you? A scene or an arc or something like that?
So book three, I actually wrote book three of Dragon Songs first. It was snowing here. I live in Virginia, and when it snows, everything shuts down for like a week with an inch of snow. And we actually had 3 straight weekends of 12 plus inches of snow. So we were pretty much shut down for a month. And I have my own business. I'm an acupuncturist, and nobody was coming to the clinic during that time. So I had a month, and I had just found all the stuff that my Dungeons and Dragons stuff from when I was a kid in my mom's house, and I had recreated the world. And so I wrote this novel in basically 150,000 word novel in a month. And that's my favorite story so far. And I think a lot of readers feel the same way. And my favorite scene is actually, it's called The Dance of Swords. And I've done a first person version of that, which is in Jeff Wheeler's Deep Magic this past season. But it's kind of like the story in I can't think of the name of it right offhand, but it's when I think they're trying to kill Liu Bang, when there's a guy who's doing a sword dance and then tries to kill him in the sword dance. It's kind of based on that, but also the idea of Gong Sun, the Tang Dynasty dancer who used two swords.
Cool. I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the right the name off the top of my head either.
It's from
Um,
Si Chu Bawang, I think. Si Chu Bawang is the play that you hear about this story the most out of.
cool. I totally off topic, but I was been listening to the China History podcast and going through the Tang Dynasty poetry series, so it kind of rings a bell. Anyway, I wanted to ask one more question about the Legends of Tivara, which I know you recently have re-released the series. What's the story behind that? Why did you end up doing that?
A lot of it was based on audience analysis. And so the I shouldn't say the original. The second attempt at covers is a very epic fantasy looking cover. It has a pair of dragons that are circling around a globe, and inside the globe is some kind of magical item. And so it has it's a symbolic cover. But later I released the series as an ebook with all four books bundled in one, and I built a pretty large audience off of that. It sold about 50,000 copies, so it did pretty well. And so I was analyzing my audience from that, and it was mostly women in their 30s and up. And so I was looking to recreate the covers to try to appeal to that audience. So
How
less
has
symbolic and more character based.
Got it? How has that re-release been going for you?
Pretty badly, actually. It could be that was a bad choice, but as one of my friends said, it's a series that's already sold. I mean, when it was bundled, it sold 50,000. It got 32 million reads on Kindle Unlimited. And then this individual's books had sold a couple thousand as well. So it's a series that is already, it's already been pretty fairly established. So it's kind of hard to find new readers.
Right. Well, hopefully it gains long legs. I mean, I know that the new cover art is definitely just like it's kind of the kind of stuff I would like to just have as wall art. It's really beautiful. Who is that artist, by the way?
His name is Bin Hai, and he's a Vietnamese artist. Um, he is immensely talented, but sometimes I feel it's like an abusive relationship because it's like he's very late with his on deadlines. Like if I know I need something in April, I'll tell him like in November. It's like and I'll tell him I'll need it at the end of December, and then it'll still be late. I mean, but then when I see it, I'm like, oh my god, this guy is just immensely talented, and so. While I'm here, like just spreading that I'm not going to make this deadline, I'm here thinking how I need to find another artist, and then he presents this gorgeous work. I'm like, how can I like not use this guy when he's so talented? So his worst was 1 year. He actually I commissioned the first thing I commissioned with him. He was a year late.
Wow, that
So
is that is quite late. You
yeah.
mentioned Dungeons and Dragons a few moments ago. Are your genre influences in terms of the things that influence your writing?
So when I was recreating, so the Legends of Tivara, the world of it is based upon the Dungeons and Dragons campaign I created as a 14-year-old. And 14-year-old boys, they might have very vivid imaginations, but not necessarily a good sense of the world. And so when I recreated it, I kind of tried to take into some of the experiences I had. I worked in the securities that is stocks in the Taiwan market, and so had a better understanding of the economy or how an economy works when I recreated it. So I would say a lot of real life things influenced me, like news articles. The video game Civilization or the computer game Civilization also influenced me because you have these cultures that are not, traditionally close to each other or historically close to each other, but in Civilization you could have like the Aztecs next to the Chinese, and so the question is, I mean, you exchange technologies, but what kind of cultural exchange would you have as well? So a lot of that came into my thinking. But in terms of overall influences, I would say Star Wars is huge, and we're talking about the original trilogy. I have words about both the prequels and the sequels, both good and bad. Um, Lord of the Rings, not the movies, which I didn't like because as a child, when I read them, it was much more interesting in my imagination than it was on screen. And then I would actually add Jacqueline Carey to that. She has this book called Kushiel's Dart, which is in her series is just absolutely brilliant. And I just love the way she fleshes out these just very three-dimensional, or I even say four-dimensional characters.
It's funny. It's really, really funny that you mention Chinese and Aztec because now this is spoilers for anybody who's reading my current series, which is called The Nine Heavens and Ten Earths. But I actually do have Aztec and Chinese elements in this story. It hasn't even been revealed in the plot yet. It's been, well, in the book,
Spoiler.
yeah, in book 3, which I'm currently writing, it kind of starts to come up in the plot. But so that's really weird that you would bring that up. In any case, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I'm actually curious about how you worked in those Asian elements into Legends of Tivara, because I have it and I've just cracked it open, but I haven't really dug into it. How did you go about doing that in terms of the cultures and stuff? Did you create a new Asian culture, or is it specifically like Chinese culture, or how did you tackle it?
Well, I like the visual. I like the visuals of the Tang Dynasty. The kinds of robes that you would see during the Tang Dynasty. So I would say visually, it's very Tang. The architectural aspects are anywhere from Tang to Qing, and then I actually have aspects of Japanese as well. I think that for me individually personally, I'm fascinated by cultures and in transition. And so for China, that is the warring states period, and Japan also had its Sengoku Jidai, which is the warring states period for Japan as well. So that fascinates me, and so some of the visual effects of that and some of the way that I structured the government is based partially on the bureaucracy of actually Han Dynasty, and then also certain aspects that is the military system of feudal Japan, of Tokugawa. Well, actually not Tokugawa, but some of the earlier versions.
Very cool.
So those are all little influences here and there.
Cool. Now, as I mentioned at the outset, you're primarily a Western fantasy author with Asian influences in there. But in recent years, the Quantum Cultivation stuff has become very, very popular online. And I know that you are working on just about ready to release something that is a lot more down that path. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So as I said, my day job is as an acupuncturist, and my hobby, I guess, the hobby I get paid for is teaching Wing Chun Kung Fu. And so I created a magical system, or a martial magical system, that was based on the five elements and yin and yang. And I say create, but I pretty much ripped off from actual historical texts in terms of how they interact with each other. And so I had the system, but it didn't fit with the magic system of Legends of Tivara. And so I wanted to create another one, but I didn't quite know I didn't know what I wanted to fit it into. And then I came across Sarah Lynn's Street Cultivation, and I really dug that. I was this stuff is pretty cool. They're setting like a wuxia series, or yeah, I guess it's an wuxia series in modern days, or even actually slightly futuristic. And so I decided to do more of a cyberpunk xianxia mashup. So it has like, well, I can't decide if it would be more wuxia or xianxia. Uh,
The line there is kind of blurred, to be
there are
honest.
levels and ranks. So, and it's based upon, the idea in Chinese, you have the idea, or in Chinese medicine, you have the idea of lesser yang and greater yang, and, greater yang, or sorry, maximum yang. So those are kind of the levels. They're kind of based, you have like, someone can go from like lesser yin to lesser yang, to greater yin to greater yang, to greatest yin and greatest yang. And then so there's 6 levels, and that's how it works. And same idea of wood overcoming earth, and earth overcoming water, and the sort of idea of 5 elements.
On the cyberpunk side, is this more of a like Blade Runner kind of gritty dystopian future, or is it more along the lines of maybe like what's that Tom Cruise one I'm thinking about? Like all super high technology and the government's watching everything, or like what kind of a world is it?
That's the latter. Basically, the government has cameras everywhere. So yeah, it's kind of like that. The cyberpunk aspect is that so I have it's a little different from a lot of the I mostly read Western cultivation stories as opposed to the web novels that are translated into English. And I've noticed that they generally are one point of view versus in this one I've done three point of views. And one of them is a hacker who experiences the internet, so to speak, as feudal Japan. And so it has a little bit of aspects of game lit where this hacker is trying when she's trying to break into something, she sees it as being a fortress, and so she has to figure out ways of getting past the sentinels, which are like, guards that look like samurai or something like that. So there is that aspect, and then there you have a cultivator. It's set in 2800 Kyoto, and so, which is my wife's hometown. So I kind of wanted to do something there. And so there's a cultivator who has come from the land of rivers and lakes, so kind of a joke on Jianghu. And so he is like a master cultivator who can do all these cool things, and he's fighting against like alien invasion and people like shock troopers and power armor and that kind of thing.
Cool. I remember reading on the book description because it's not out yet. I haven't had a chance to read it, obviously. You mentioned, I think part of the plot is that like the genes for cultivation abilities or something like that have been taken out of people's DNA or something along those lines.
Right. The idea that humans were trying to perfect themselves through genetic manipulation, but in doing so, they removed the ones that allow them to cultivate. And so you have modern day, like modern to them day humans, but then you also have these humans that have been left behind. And so one of the other main characters is one of these humans who's been left behind, and he has this really menial job as a janitor. And so he meets the master, and it turns out, oh, this guy can actually cultivate. So
How much did your background in traditional Chinese medicine and martial arts play into that? Was it it obviously was an asset, but did that really make it a lot easier for you in creating the system and everything?
immensely. I mean, as I was saying, I pretty much ripped off a lot of things just from what I know about Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like what I've noticed is a lot of people like training sequences and explaining how things work. And
Yes.
so I go a lot into that, like in terms of how I would talk to a patient in terms of describing,
Right.
wood doing this to earth or earth
Yeah.
doing this to water. So that kind of thing.
In my translation, my translation work, I've had obviously a lot of five element stuff. And so I did a lot of research into it, but I would always have to, like every single time something came up, I would have to go look up information because I wanted to know, is this accurate or is the author spinning it in a different way? So I would always have to look up, okay, how does earth relate to fire or water or whatever it is? But you basically just know that stuff off the top of your head, basically.
Not to brag, but I kind of have to.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
kind of
that's your
have
job. So
to. Yeah.
I definitely envy you in that regard quite a bit.
But yeah, I like to tie it in. I mean, even as a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, I like to tie it into Western medicine as well, or Western understanding, Western science. So there's a lot of that in the book as well, like sort of connecting. When we say, for example, fire is rising, then we can relate that to certain enzymes and hormones. So I go into that a little bit.
Very cool. So that's called Quantum Cultivation, and I am definitely looking forward to reading that. One off the wall question that I did not bring up remotely in our last conversation, which is what is this is going to come off completely from left field, but what is your take on the Ip Man movies? Since you're a Wing Chun practitioner, and that's probably what everybody in the West, at least I think, who is new to the concept understands it from, or at least is introduced to it from. What is your take on those movies?
So this can be a very long answer or a very short answer.
We'll go.
So
Let's go for not too long, but not too short.
okay, so I will say when I was learning Wing Chun, I was learning in Taiwan, and my sifu is Yip Man's nephew, Lu Wenqing or Lo Man Kam in Cantonese. Right? I won't butcher Cantonese. I butchered Mandarin already, but the Cantonese is even worse. And so he actually asked me to translate certain things for him, certain articles about that he wrote about Yip Man, and this was back in the '90s before the movies even came out. And so, the movie one, the first one, Ip Man, is absolutely brilliant. I mean, to me, I think it captures the emotion of the period. We're talking about the Republican period before the war, and then what happens during the war. And every single fight is based on a real fight. Of course, it's dramatized, to make it look cool. For example, I've never heard of him fighting 10 karate people at once, but he did fight a karate master during the World War II. The Japanese basically wanted him to teach them Wing Chun. He refused, and so they put up a karate master against him. So there was a fight. The part in the movie where he breaks the revolver, that's actually based on a true story, which happened after the war. So a lot of these, the first one is I think, historically semi-accurate. The second one is a remake of Rocky Four. Basically you have a rival. Your rival becomes your friend. Your rival gets killed by a foreign fighter. You defeat the foreign fighter. You declare world peace, then go look for Adrian. I mean, it's pretty much a remake of Rocky Four. Um, Yip Man 3 is completely fictional. Yip Man 4 is, oh my God, that's just, I mean, he never went to the United States. They
Right. Yeah.
portray his son as being like a child, but at the time his son was like 30 some years old. So it's completely fictional. But, as a Chinese kid growing up in the States, it kind of gives you a sense of, pride to watch watch like people who are bullying Chinese people get beat up. So
Yeah.
can't help to enjoy that part. So
I
yeah.
still haven't watched the fourth one. I watched the others, and obviously I
Oops,
like them a
spoiler.
lot. The one part that I can't get over is his fight with Mike Tyson, which like I just feel like it's so over the top that it was cool looking. Don't get me wrong, it was really cool, but I couldn't overcome my disbelief of the just crazy stuff that was happening in that
Yeah.
one particular fight scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could go on and on about the state of Wing Chun and how people approach training and boxing and stuff, but that would take another
Sure.
hour.
Maybe we can revisit that topic on another podcast. One thing I
That
also
was
want,
that would Let's just say that was for show. I think that if Yip Man fought Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson would have kicked his ass.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Mike Tyson probably could kill people with punches that weren't trained in his size and weight and that kind of stuff.
He totally could. I saw this clip of him from like half a year ago where he's training for that fight. He was going to go fight somebody. I can't remember
Yeah,
who. And I was like, holy crap, this guy is still fast and powerful. It's like, I would not want to screw with that guy.
yeah, yeah. It
So
was a cool looking fight scene to be sure, but perhaps not the most realistic of the series. One thing I wanted to touch on is the actual process of writing, and we did talk about this in the previous one, so I kind of know the answer already. But do you have any kind of philosophy or practice that kind of you stick to when you're writing? Do you kind of just wing it? What is your way of putting pen to paper?
I am very much, I know where a story starts usually, and I know where it ends. I have an idea of a couple of the plot points in the middle, and it's just a matter of connecting the dots to go from A to B. And I say just a matter. I mean, it's usually not a very straight line.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes I can get stuck very easily. I can get distracted very easily. So if people's like, what advice would you give, aspiring authors? Like, don't write like me because I waste tons of time.
What do you do when you hit writer's block or whatever you want to call it? You get stuck, or you're trying to figure out what's going to happen next and you're not coming up with anything. Do you just walk off and do something else, or do you like throw a ball against the wall, or what do you do?
All the above. There's no one, true try and true way for me that works to get me out of writer's block. What I did find, like Quantum Cultivation, I started that last year and then I lost interest in it part of the way. And that was just 2020 in general. I started 3 different novels and lost interest about halfway in all of them. And getting past that middle was tough. But when I got to the end, I knew what plot twist I was going to put in. And I was just became so enthused about it. And I probably wrote 1/4 of it in about 2 weeks, just because I was like, I'm really getting into this. And then I knew what the plot twist was going to be and everything like that. And so I went back to fix that. And so finishing it was a lot easier than actually writing it in the first place.
Right. Do you have a follow any sort of like specific structure, like 3 act or hero's journey or something like that, or do you just kind of float where the wind takes you?
I'm definitely a float where the wind takes me kind of person. And sometimes I really think I need to structure stories a little more carefully. But yeah, I'm not very good at following. That's the thing.
Um, shifting a little bit from specifically the writing to the publishing side, since you're an indie author, how have you seen the industry for indie authors specifically change over the past few years, or has it changed from your perspective?
Oh, dramatically. It's dramatically changed, and several things that have happened are so many people who are getting into it. So there's a lot more out there, um, and so it's kind of harder to get seen, I think. But I basically published the Dragon Songs. It wasn't called the Dragon Songs back then. I had the wrong covers and the wrong everything. But that's beside the point. 2016, I launched in 2016 using a strategy that one of my friends used in 2014, which was book bloggers. And it was really hard to get a book blogger by 2016 because they were being inundated by indie authors who were trying to get them to read the book and review. And so by 2017, I was learning you need to use paid promos. But by 2017, paid promos were falling out of favor. So in that by then, like newsletter swaps were the thing to do. And by 2019, you have all these readers who are getting too many newsletters from authors. So newsletter swaps aren't working anymore. So paid advertising is the way to go. So there's been this big evolution ever since I started. And I think my peak was 2018 when one of my books hit the algorithms. And really that was the tried and true ways. If you could hit the algorithms, you were going to make bank. And I did. So I was very lucky with that. But then Amazon changed the algorithms. And so it became much more of a pay to play type of environment.
Since the last time we talked, in fact, just a couple of days ago, Amazon made an announcement and sent out an email. I'm not sure if you got it or saw it, but they're launching a new serialized.
Bella.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
About the serialized fiction. I think they are trying to, you know, imitate the success of Wattpad or Royal Road and maybe even Chidian or some of those platforms. But I was here thinking that the reason why most people follow those platforms is because they're free. So who knows how well this particular venture will go for them. That said, I had already been planning a serial with that character I was mentioning that all my readers like. So I was already planning on doing something like that. So I was like, I could always give it a try and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, then I'll bundle it into a book and sell it on on Amazon.
Sure. So are you going to hit that out like right when it launches, or are you going to kind of wait and see how it?
Let me move because we have like a lawn. Somebody's mowing my lawn right now. So I got
Okay.
let me go to the back of the house where there's where it's not quite as loud. Sorry about that.
No worries. I was just saying, is that kind of just an idea in the back of your head, or are you actually kind of putting that into your schedule to give it a shot?
So I had this idea I had the idea of doing it, and then it's been on the back burner as I tried to finish Quantum Cultivation and then this other story I'm working on. So, but I might go into it. I have an idea of like several things that happen that would work really well in serialized form. Now, whether I actually do it or not, that's another story.
Cool. Well, we're getting up to about the 30-minute mark, so I don't want to go too long. Is there a specific place that you would like to point readers and listeners to go to find your works?
You can look for JC Kang on Amazon, or if you're interested in Quantum Cultivation, I decided to make that as a pen name, Jace, Jace Kang. Yeah, I know, really original. It's not secret at all. It was just a way, because that's the other thing with algorithms is that Amazon recommends. And so I'm trying to reach a very different type of audience than with my regular stuff. And so I split that off. So you can look for Jace Kong if you want to check out Quantum Cultivation, which comes out in May, or if you want to see some of my older stuff, JC Kong.
Cool. I will put links to all of that stuff in the podcast description as well. And that will bring us to an end. We'll wrap up here. Thank you so much for coming on for the second time. And I hope to have you again in the future. Maybe we can talk about Wing Chun or whatever other projects you have coming up in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
And that's it for this episode, everyone. I will see you next time.